How you doing, guys? Today the plan is to start the 3-into-1 Kohler. The owner was nice enough to ship me out the recoil that he wanted to use. He wants to use this Shinaki recoil. It came with a nut and some loose bolts to, I believe, to screw it down. We'll check that out. This is the crank nut that I was using, but we'll throw that over there because we're not going to need it. So we'll do the install of the Shinaki onto the motor. We're going to set the governor. I got to get a link, and just for purpose's sake, we're going to pull the carburetor out that I used on the last Kohler project. That's this little number 13, because I don't have a carburetor right now to put on this motor, and we know this carburetor works just fine. So with that, let's go ahead, get all this stuff upstairs. Let's find a link for it and get to theoretically setting this thing up. Okay, let's go over the parts that we're going to need to get the motor started. Obviously we have the recoil, we have a clean blower cover, the bolts and the lock washers or the screws and the lock washers to mount the recoil are there. We do have the crank nut, and this is a shim washer or a hardened washer, I guess, to shim it out a little bit, but I'll make sure that the gear teeth interface with each other correctly. One thing of note is on an RJ and a Suburban for that matter, through my experiences, and I've seen a lot of these Shinaki recoils on those engines, they typically are not the tooth style. They're the nut style. So this nut actually sits like this. Oops, excuse me. Yes, that's right. I did autograph this. It sits in this position. The teeth aren't there. And the Shinaki actually has a series of paws that come out and grip the nut. And that's what spins the motor. When you pull on the cord, the cable, I should say, on this one, this tooth swings and spins out, which then engages in the teeth of the nut. And that's what rolls the engine over in order to get it started. So just a little thing. And then this base plate would not be the style that you find on an RJ. You would find the one that basically has the grass screen that goes all the way around. So just a little thing. In my personal opinion, I know everybody's going to go up in arms. Shinakis, they're the beautifulest looking recoils, but to me, they're the biggest pieces of shit on the planet Earth. This recoil will absolutely fail at one point in time. I don't care. You guys can argue with me till I'm blue in the face, but if you're looking for period correct, perfect looking, restoration, you put this on there without a doubt. If you're looking to use your RJ on a regular basis from shows and stuff like that, just go with a Fairbanks. Just as period correct, I like them better because the Fairbanks, you can polish the aluminum and make them look freaking amazing. Parts are more readily available for the Fairbanks. The Fairbanks is easier to work on. Okay, that's my editorial on that. But this owner wants a Shinaki, and that's what he will get. He'll get a Shinaki. Now, this gasket is the carburetor gasket that came from the kit, so we're going to use it and then reuse it. This is a Clinton link. It's just like the one I used on the last motor, because I need a longer link and I need a long Kohler link and I don't have one. So we're just going to use the Clinton one. This little spring, I'll show you what I did. I didn't use this on the last motor, but I am going to use it on this motor, only because I forgot to use it on the last motor. But this little spring, I hook into one of the holes on the governor arm, and then I hook it into one of the holes on the carburetor. And what that does is it controls the little bit of, there's a little bit of play in the holes and the rod. And what the spring does is the spring keeps those arms together so they actuate immediately together. And it's not like it's not like the carburetor link is going like this and the governor arm's going like this, and there's just no, you know what I mean? It connects them and lets them work in unison in a better way. So I'll show you how that goes in a few minutes. Obviously, this is the carburetor that I used on the last motor. It's base set. I did find a bowl gasket, got that in there. I just need to tighten up the nut. Other than that, we just need to do some bolts. We need to torque the flywheel into place. So first thing we're going to do is torque the flywheel. put the blower cover all on, or put all the tins on, and then mount the Shinaki. It's pretty simple, 4 bolts, 4 bolts. Test it, make sure that the gear teeth interface, and then when it's fully retracted, the gear teeth in the recoil are retracted enough that it's not going to clip or touch this nut. So let me go ahead and get that preliminarily put back together, and then I'll show you the carburetor going on. We'll put oil in it, and then I'll go break out the engine stand. So the flywheel nut is installed and torqued to 45 foot-pounds. The tins are all on, and I've snugged down all the bolts. One thing about the tins, they all bolt into aluminum. There's no need to drive it home with 600 foot-pounds. Just make them snug. You know, just tight, and then just a little bit more, and that will be more than sufficient to hold this in place. I got the recoil, the Shinaki, in place. All 4 bolts are just, they're just snug. Like you can, here, I'll show you. As you can see, I mean, it's just enough to cause friction that this thing doesn't slip back and forth. And the reason for that is I want to look down inside, and let me go get my flashlight. Where is that? Here it is. So we'll just take a quick look here. If we shine down in there, you can see, whoops, let me get out of the way. So maybe I'll shine the light over here. Will I be able to? All right. You can see, come on, baby, focus for us. There's just a hair of space between the 2 gears. They are not touching. There's probably a 1/16, maybe a little bit more of, there it is, space between the 2 teeth. And what I'm going to do is, I'm doing this with one hand, so just work with me here. With the bolts loose, I'm going to pull the recoil so it engages with the nut. Okay? And now I'm going to tighten down the 4 mounting screws. And what that does is it kind of aligns the recoil with the nut. So that way, when it engages, it's not doing one of these routines, it's not bending that way, it kind of just engages. It's the easiest way I have found to make sure that as close as possible, the center line of the Shinaki is in the center line of the crankshaft. So just keep them loose. Just make sure first off, make sure there's some space between the 2 gears, so that way when the engine's running, it's not going to interface. And then the second thing is just leave these 4 bolts kind of loose, pull the recoil so it lines up, look down inside, make sure the gears are visually in line with each other, they're not crooked or anything to that effect. And then with your left, because I'll hold it with my right hand, and I'll go in and I'll tighten 2 of the bolts, crisscross pattern, let it go, tighten up the other 2. Shinaki should be all set. And then the next thing we need to do is the carburetor. I got everything lined up. 3 of those screws are nice and tight. I have the 4th one out, and what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to cut these down a little bit. And the reason I need to cut these down is because they are protruding through the blower cover enough that they're not touching the flywheel, but I mean, you can't even get a piece of paper between the end of this screw and the edges of the fins. And that's going to become a problem because the crank has a little bit of end play. So as the engine's running, the crank is sliding this way and that way, just a couple thousandths. And it's that close. It's going to start clipping. It's going to start clipping these screws. So, and as it breaks in more, you might get a little bit more end play in the crank. So I'm going to go ahead and cut like maybe 3 or 4 threads off of each one of these bolts, screw them back in, tighten them down. I'm going to do them one at a time so that way I don't have to like realign the Shinaki. I'm going to cut like 3 or 4 threads off of each one of these, screw them down tight, and then we'll get to the carburetor. I have the carburetor mounted. The 2 1/4 bolts are just snugged down so it's in place and tight. I do have the Clinton link set up on the governor arm. As I said, I have this little spring which I just tie. You could tie it into, you got to just tie it into one, one side here and one side to the arm. And what that does, and if you notice, when I go like this with the governor arm, you can see that they move in unison instead of having a little bit of play like this. See, like if I go like this on the arm, you can see that. See how that wobbles around in the carburetor. It also wobbles around inside this. That spring gets rid of that wobble, so it's an instant actuation. I'm going to set the governor. Basically, you take this rod, because it's loose right now, all the way clockwise, so that way the little flapper is up against the cam, the part of the governor on the cam. At the same time, I'm going to go to full throttle, all right? And I'm just going to back it off just a hair, just making sure that this is fully counterclockwise. Tighten down the 1/4 bolt. It should just flip, it should just go right to idle. And that's it. We can fill this thing up with some oil. I'm going to put a little bit of break-in lube, mix it in with the oil, and then we're going to mount it to the engine stand and fire away. Carburetor, governor are installed and base set. I did put oil in the crankcase. I just added maybe about 4 good squirts of this break-in additive from Lucas and filled the rest of it up with straight 30-weight Shell Rotella. So that's all set. I went ahead and trimmed off the sheath on the end of the kill wire. I installed the fuel barb, and that's it. It's time to go get the engine stand. Oh, I do have to go get a muffler. I have a cheesy little test muffler in the shed. I'll just rip it off one of the engines and screw it into this one. Mount it to the engine stand, put fuel, hook up the throttle. Hopefully the throttle will work, because the last engine it didn't work so well. But hopefully on this engine it'll work a little better. And fire in the hole. All right, everything in theory should be all set to go. We got the throttle hooked up. Carburetor's got fuel in it, fuel in the tank to the carburetor, I should say. I tested the kill switch. The throttle still doesn't work very well, so that has to be a redesign, but that's for a later date. Right now, I'm not even going to stop rolling. We're just going to go ahead, set everything up to start, and hopefully it will just start. Okay, so I've got the camera set up. Hopefully it's in the shot. Gonna just go ahead and do our checks and our cross checks. This throttle really makes me angry, but we're gonna leave that at that. Choke, fuel. For an initial startup, I don't think you could ever ask for anything better than that. I'm going to let it run for about 15-20 minutes, just like this, at this at this speed, just so I can make sure everything gets broken in, or initially broken in, and there's no major problems. So, yeah, that sounds great. All right, let's let it run, and I'll be back. And there is the problem, I think. The float, for some reason, is like jammed in this up position, and I don't understand what the hell is going on. Seeing that this thing was 100%, you can clearly see there's a major issue here with this float, which means it wasn't even metering the fuel. It was just pouring fuel right into the, and I have no idea how the hell this happened, seeing that I did nothing to this carburetor since the last time I used it. But all right, well, I guess that's better to be that than something else, I guess. I'm gonna go take this into the garage, tear it all apart, clean the whole damn thing out, figure out what's going on with this float, and reset everything. You're never gonna believe what happened. So I'm looking at this thing I'm saying, like, what the hell is going on with this thing? The things are perfect. You shake the float, there's no fuel in it, there's nothing, there's no loose bodies, it's perfect. I looked at the needle, you know, It's a used needle, but it's good enough. There's nothing wrong. Took my flashlight, shined it into the inlet, and I could see perfect light shining through the little hole. I actually went down there and took a look inside and said, nice and clean. What the hell is going on, right? Then I noticed, you probably can't, let me get the light again. But I noticed, wow, the seat doesn't seem like it's screwed down tight to the body of the carburetor. So I took my fingers, and sure enough, this thing, the seat is loose. It spins. It's hard to do with one hand, but right there, see? It's loose. So what happened was the vibration of the engine, I mustn't have had the seat tightened down enough, and it, vibrated and worked its way down, which then pushed the needle, because this is right up against the seat, right? Right up against the seat, which brought the whole thing down and caused the float, obviously in this position, to go into that cocked position. And basically, there was an issue with the fuel. So, and that's probably why it stopped running. Like it ran good and then stopped running, what I mean, because this thing was probably just like, wiggling itself down. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten this up, put the seat back in, make sure the float is good, bolt it all back together, throw it on the motor, and let's see what happens. Now that float angle, that's more acceptable. So when you have a carburetor semi-ass set up right, this is what you get. Engine runs great, no apparent issues. This is how I got the low idle set for right now, but let's go ahead and go to fast idle. Come on. So with a little bit more, governor adjustment on a better adjusted carburetor, I don't think you could ask for anything better than that. Well, thank you very much for watching the 3-in-1 Kohler. I hope you liked this series. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. This is all set for the owner, so I think they're going to be very happy with it. If you could please like, share, and subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated. Leave a comment below. That also helps the video, number one. And number two, I enjoy seeing comments of all styles. And until the next project, thank you very much, and you have a great day.